Hi everybody, this is the wrap up for week 1 of PA 4530, and each week I'm just going to do a real short wrap up. I'll post it either on Saturday or Sunday, and along with this I also post a wrap up document which you can read. And I just really want to talk about what we learned this week so that we operate from the same page. This will only take a few minutes. So first of all, here's some observations from week 1. Participation was good, but it can improve. I do establish deadlines. Typically, the deadline is going to be Wednesday for your initial post and Friday for a comment post to a classmate. This week it was Thursday, just for one post. But it's really important that we stick to the deadlines, and the reason is it gives everybody a chance to participate. Second thing, on discussion posts, there are advantages and disadvantages to the online environment. When it comes to discussion in class, you have the opportunity to pick up on things like body language, and you don't have that opportunity in a discussion board. On the other hand, in an online discussion board, you have a chance to formulate a more coherent response. So please take the time to do that, to develop a concise yet complete post. Don't rush through it. Some evidences of people rushing through a discussion post online are things like a lot of spelling errors. When you refer to yourself as I, using lowercase, frankly, it's fine with me if you do your discussion post on your iPhone device or other device, but it still should be correct and grammatical. So take the time to do that correctly, because that adds a lot to the discussion. And then finally, commenting on other student posts. A lot of you did that this week, which is great. I didn't require it this week, but in future weeks I will. So please use this opportunity to pose questions to your peers, to provide feedback, and to offer constructive criticism. An online class is really a great opportunity for all of us to learn the art of discussion without insult. All of us live online to some extent, and you can go on Twitter, you can go on Facebook, you can go on various news sites, and you can read all kinds of personal invective and insults, name calling. That's really not appropriate at all in a classroom discussion board. That said, you don't have to tell everyone, gee, your post was wonderful, it's the best thing I ever read. Really what you ought to be doing is asking questions about things you don't understand and maybe offering a slightly different take on what your classmates said. So learn that art of perhaps disagreeing without being disagreeable. This is a great opportunity to do that. And I do monitor the discussion boards, so I'm always on the lookout for inappropriate name calling and things like that. But typically most students don't do that. But just use the opportunity to have a genuine discussion. Okay, so a couple of slides on why I asked the questions I did. Why did I ask this question on deliberation? I asked, what's the difference between deliberation and discussion? So a lot of you really talked about these things, and I was happy to see this. First of all, deliberation is a word that denotes a more formal process. Something that no one mentioned, but this is actually a really good point that I've thought of when people mention deliberation. Deliberation is the official word that's used for what a jury does in a jury trial. That jury deliberates. That's the official term for what they're charged to do. And they actually decide the outcome of that case, whether it's a criminal case where they decide whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty, or it's a civil case where they're deciding if there are damages, for example, and whether the defendant has to pay the plaintiff damages. So the result of a deliberation in a jury is always an outcome. Discussions can be formal, but typically a discussion is informal, isn't it? if you're in your place of work and you run into someone in the stairwell or in the lunchroom, you might talk to them about something, about sports, or watch what you watched on TV, or shoes, or anything, and then you're going to wrap it up with, hey, it was good talking to you. Let's talk later. That's not what Bryson's talking about when we're talking about deliberation within an organization. He says that deliberation occurs in situations requiring choice, and that the deliberative tradition doesn't presume that there is a correct solution or one best answer to address major challenges. So when we're talking about strategic planning, thinking, and managing, the idea is that within your organization, you are deliberating for solutions, and you are striving then to come up with choices. How do we approach this problem? Here's option 1, option 2, option 3. Your deliberations are leading to an opportunity to make a choice. And so I really want you to think about that as we move along through the course. And I also want you to think about something I said in that paragraph E right there. Strategic planning, thinking, and managing. That's really what this course is about. Not just creating a plan, but in an organization having the actual deliberate act of planning, thinking, and managing in your organization. And then I asked this question about globalization, which does seem, I think, a little bit like a odd question to throw in, but there is a method to this madness. First of all, globalization is one of these words that packs an emotional punch, right? It's one of the words that's often referred to, as a trigger word. It triggers an emotional response in people, and that's because people have a mindset about the word that they've built up from what they've learned, what they've observed, and people probably don't disagree, or they don't agree, I should say, on the word itself. But here's what Bryson has to say, and this is why I wanted you to talk about this. He says in chapter 1 that the boundaries between public, private, and nonprofit have eroded. National sovereignty has leaked up to multinational corporations, international organizations, and international alliances. Sovereignty has leaked out to businesses and nonprofit organizations. Okay, so what does he mean by that? Probably most of you have taken Introduction to U.S. Government or some class like that, where you learned about the term sovereignty, which basically means that a nation state has the ability to decide its own fate for what goes on inside its boundaries, its own laws, its own criminal prosecution system, its own military. But in a real sense, what Bryson is referring to is the idea that there are multinational corporations and that there are international organizations, treaty organizations, and agreements among nations. There are international alliances. There are nonprofit organizations that are international in scope. And so, in a very real sense, part of this idea of sovereignty has leaked a little bit. And so we live in a world very much where, it's not just the United States is in charge of what goes on in the United States. Canada is in charge of what goes on in Canada. There are opportunities for other kinds of sovereignty, if you will, to take effect. And I don't subscribe to, personally, this is my opinion, to a lot of conspiracy theories about globalization. But it's just a very real environment. So, in other words, whatever you think about globalization, and as I said, it's a trigger word, the very important fact is that globalization does affect all of us. And it affects us locally as well. And that applies whether you're in government, nonprofit, or a for-profit business, even a small sole proprietor business. You know, if you're a plumber, chances are that a lot of the supplies you use to repair somebody's pipes in their house were made in another country. Um, that's a very real possibility. So it's something you need to be aware of as you strategically think, plan, and act. Okay, and I asked you this other question in the intro discussion. You know, what pops into your mind when you hear the term strategic planning? And I threw a few of your own quotes out there. They're kind of scattered about this slide. And really, for the most part, you can look at what I put up here. This isn't everybody's quotes, but um, there's nothing wrong with any of these quotes. And I think, in fact, they're really good elements of strategic planning. But what is strategic planning? That's really that's the difficult question that we're going to encounter this term. So, what I think strategic planning is, the slides is coming up next week. What I think strategic planning is goes back to your book, where the idea is that we're learning where we are, where we want to be, and how we get there. That's on the text on page 11. So go look at that diagram on page 11 of the text. And next week, what we're going to do is tackle one of the issues in the box that says where we are, and that is this idea of mandates. So that's week 2. We're going to talk about mandates, and now in week 2, I'm going to start something that will continue throughout the semester, and that is that I have you use the website of a nonprofit or government organization. This week in week 2, it's going to be an organization called One World Health, which is an organization in Omaha. It's a clinic, and they are a nonprofit clinic. And I'm going to have you use their website to dive into the theme of mandates. Remember, I do have a Twitter feed that I use to add some supplemental material to the class. And if you want to, if you find posts of interest, items of interest in the media, and you want to post it on your own Twitter feed, just use that hashtag PA4530. And as always, please do send me your comments and questions. I look forward to week 2. Thanks.